The 20th century shall be the century of Canada and of Canadian development. Over 100 years ago, Wilfrid Laurier publicly declared this bold statement. At the time of this declaration, Canada was just a young country. On the world stage, Canada was seen as an insignificant, agriculturally based developing nation. The military was small and inexperienced, and Canada was rarely recognized for anything other than its wheat exports. However, where most people saw nothing more than a piece of the British Commonwealth, Laurier saw potential in the inexperienced nation and cemented his words into history as a daring, maybe even arrogant statement.
Words and actions, however, are two very different things, and this leads many people to doubt Laurier's statement. Although he died in 1919, meaning he never got to see if his prediction came true or not, we are now able to look back from the 21st century and evidently prove that Laurier was correct. Laurier's vision for Canada was to build a country of innovation, development, and worldwide impact. As Canada progressed through the 20th century, this vision was proven more and more correct, as significant technological and scientific advancements were discovered. Ranging from life-saving medical breakthroughs to ingenious nuclear engineering, Canada has developed into an innovative nation that has undeniably far exceeded Laurier's expectations in the scientific and technological field.
One such discovery occurred in the early 1900s, when diabetes haunted millions and was barely short of a death sentence. Ideas of treating the disease were also sparse. At one point, doctors began injecting their patients with pancreas, which unsurprisingly did not work. However, in 1920, a young surgeon named Frederick Banting devised a theory around pancreatic research. His theory was built on isolating the islet cells, the possible source of the pancreas's internal secretion, which would allow the pancreas to continue creating its necessary substances and use it to treat diabetes. However, Banting was inexperienced in the research field, so he enlisted the help of John J.R. MacLeod, who provided the laboratory, test animals, and the help of Charles Best, a student assistant. Later on, James Bertram Collett was added, a talented biochemist who greatly improved their team. On January 11, 1922, they began testing their pancreatic excretes on human subjects, first of whom was Leonard Thompson, a 13-year-old boy on the verge of death. Initially, no success was seen. However, 12 days later, they saw great improvements in his health. It was a major step in the right direction. However, the research was nowhere near finished. Thankfully, the key to completion was discovered by Collett, as he was able to develop an improved extraction process and create a purer extract. The research was making astounding progress. By the time the research was fully completed and papers were published, the news had gotten around the world. They were awarded the Nobel Prize in 1923 after one of the fastest deliberation periods of all time. The medicine was spread all over the world, and it sparked the beginning of scientific advancements and global recognition for the young nation.
Another advancement came in 1975, the Canadarm. Also known as the Shuttle Remote Manipulator System, this machine was a technological marvel built by Spar Aerospace, a Canadian company. The system acted similarly to a large human arm, as it had a wrist, elbow, and shoulder, though it did have more mobility. The arm also includes several cameras serving as eyes. The arm was incredibly powerful, being able to lift up to 266,000 kilograms in space. Its functions included deploying, capturing, and repairing satellites, positioning astronauts, maintaining equipment, and moving cargo. Some well-known tasks it was involved with included docking the space shuttle to the Russian Mir space station, involvement in missions to the Hubble Space Telescope, and even the construction of the International Space Station. These functions cemented the arm as a critical tool for satellites, astronauts, and more. These functions served the world for 30 years before it was retired in 2011. It also played a major role in inspiring many future Canadian robotics, such as the Canadarm2, which debuted in the 21st century, and further established Canada as a leader in technological innovation.
One last notable Canadian invention is the CANDU reactor, short for Canada Deuterium Uranium. The first CANDU was developed by the Canadian corporation Atomic Energy of Canada Limited in the 1950s. This nuclear reactor was quite unique compared to others at the time due to many factors. For example, it utilized natural uranium for fuel, used deuterium, also called heavy water, and it could be refueled while still running. The CANDU reactor's use of natural uranium makes it stand out as it is not only safer, but more efficient than reactors that rely on enriched uranium. Moreover, due to the way natural uranium is composed, the reactor needs about 25 to 30% less uranium to produce the same amount of energy. However, the key part of the reactor is the deuterium. CANDU used deuterium, or heavy water, as a moderator as opposed to light water because it doesn't absorb as many neutrons. This makes it 1,700 times more efficient when it comes to helping the uranium convert to plutonium and generate energy. Deuterium also serves as the reactor's coolant, as large amounts of heat are produced during the nuclear reactions. The CANDU reactor stands as one of the most efficient uranium-based reactors through its ability to use less uranium and utilization of deuterium. This is clearly proven through the several other countries that have purchased the reactors. These countries include India, Pakistan, Argentina, South Korea, Romania, and China. All in all, the creation of this reactor emphasizes Canada's leadership in both science and technology, actively proving Laurier's prediction of the country true. Laurier's vision of Canada was also a country that strived for inclusivity and equality. These characteristics were primarily proven through the improvement of women's rights, rights for every citizen, and for promotion of diversity.
In 1920, women's rights took yet another major step forward. This came through the Persons case, where 5 brave women challenged the idea that women were not persons in the eye of the law. Back then, according to the British common law, only men were considered persons in the case of rights and privileges. This clearly sexist law that prevented women from running for the House of Commons or being appointed into the Senate led to a group of 5 women petitioning the Canadian government to clarify whether or not women were also considered persons. These 5 women were given the title of the Famous Five, and it included some of the most prominent female activists: Emily Murphy, Nellie McClung, Henrietta Muir Edwards, Louise McKenney, and Irene Parlby. Initially, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled against the 5, ultimately deciding that women were not persons in the eye of the law. However, they refused to settle for failure, so they appealed to the Privy Council in Britain. This time, they were successful, as the court reversed the initial decision. This overruling was a major breakthrough for women, and was printed in newspapers throughout the nation. The case also inspired other countries to fight for rights, such as in India and in Australia. The Persons case was also one of the first of its kind, which put Canada at the forefront of humanitarian and social reform.
One of the most impactful features of the 20th century was without doubt the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Introduced in 1982, this single document completely reshaped Canadian policies, and it still serves as one of the most evident facets of the 20th century that proves Laurier's prediction correct. Before the Charter, there were existing laws that protected human rights and freedoms. However, these laws were not part of the Constitution, and some could only be applied to specific law types. Rights were not guaranteed, and reform was needed. It was in 1980 when Pierre Trudeau's government decided to patriate the Canadian Constitution and gain the ability to change its laws without Britain's permission. Trudeau wanted complete control of the laws, as well as a Charter of Rights and Freedoms to offer protected and guaranteed rights to the people. Although there were debates of who should control the Constitution, most premiers agreed with Trudeau, with the exception of Quebec. Finally, Britain was asked to pass the Constitution Act of 1982. In Ottawa, Queen Elizabeth II officially signed the document, and the Charter became law. Some of the most important rights in the Charter include freedom of religion and belief without fear of punishment, freedom of speech, mobility rights, right to enter in, remain in, or leave Canada freely. Everyone, regardless of their race, gender, age, beliefs, etc., are all equal and cannot be discriminated against. And lastly, acknowledgement and honoring of the old Indigenous treaties.
Although the Charter helped greatly to human rights and freedoms, many still felt that its policies on multiculturalism promoted identity rather than tackle the problems of equality in Canada. Therefore, in 1987, David Crombie, Minister of Crown, Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs of Canada, introduced the Multiculturalism Act, and it received royal assent in 1988. It declared that the government would recognize and promote the understanding that multiculturalism is a fundamental characteristic of the Canadian heritage and identity, and that it promotes the idea that all Canadians should have the opportunity to preserve, enhance, and share their cultural heritage. Once again, Canada showed its progressive mentality. This document made Canada the first country to recognize multiculturalism as a national value, exemplifying the advanced social and humanitarian values that Canada possesses.
In 1904, Wilfrid Laurier set the precedent of what the 20th century was to be for Canada. We were to become a nation that accomplished great feats, was globally revered, and could boast in its rich history and astounding development. Throughout the century, and even into today, bold people with even bolder dreams helped achieve Laurier's vision. Canada made scientific discoveries that saved millions of lives, built machines that helped humanity explore space, gave the world high-tech and efficient clean energy sources, fought to give women the right to run for the House of Commons and be appointed to the Senate, secured rights for all of its citizens, no matter their race, gender, or social status, and became the first country to instill multiculturalism as a national value. Laurier gave a small, developing nation a challenge for the century. By the end of it, Canada didn't just participate in the world, it shaped it, and it is this fact that is what truly revealed Laurier's words to not just be hopeful, but prophetic.